Hey, thanks for tuning in to Between the Lines podcast. I'm Alex Woods, a former ICU nurse and founder of U.S. Legal Nurse Consultants. This show uses medical legal cases to explore judgment, strategy, and decision making. But what we're really talking about is how people think when there isn't a clear answer. The stories come from medicine and law right now, but the patterns, the missteps, and the strategy, it applies everywhere. This is about reading between the lines and knowing what to do with what you find. So let's get into it.
I graduated law school and passed the bar in 2013.
Okay.
And I started my career in Ohio, where I graduated from Case Western, and then got a job working for an insurance defense firm right out of law school. They're actually a great group of people. There was a firm called Davis and Young, which I think is still in existence, and they're still doing stuff. But then they split off into a new firm called Collins Roach, Utley and Garner. And I started with them right when they broke off. So when I started in law school, or started as a lawyer, like the firm split. And so I followed the partner that hired me down to Columbus, and that's where I began my career. I actually just got a case, my one of my first Ohio cases here at Morgan and Morgan. I just got an answer from my old firm, so it's kind of funny.
That's
Um,
I'm here in
so
Columbus, Ohio. So,
yeah, I was in Columbus, and then this one that I got the answer from is from the Cleveland office. So,
yeah.
but I still practice in Northern Ohio. So
Oh, okay.
I practice primarily in Southeast Michigan, but I've got a lot of cases all over the state. I've got cases in Northern Michigan. I've actually got a case in the UP right now, which will be a real blast when that thing starts litigating. Have
Yeah.
to fly up there, I guess, or drive across the bridge. And then I've got cases in Northern Ohio, primarily like Toledo, Cleveland, that area.
Yeah. Yeah. You know Clancy?
He's at Morgan, yeah.
Yeah.
Clancy's
Clancy,
great.
oh my gosh, he is so talented, so
Yeah,
good.
he's the man. I can only hope to aspire to the heights that that man has reached. So
Oh my goodness. I mean, our
yeah,
call actually went on over an hour and 15 minutes, and we could have gone for 2 more hours. It was
yeah.
just
I
such a genuine, authentic dude and so talented. When we talked about all kinds of cases and just the
What's
way
wild
that,
about people like that is, these guys who Morgan and Morgan, like we're the biggest firm, and
yeah,
uh, we have a little bit of a reputation, and I think other plaintiff firms like think we're a bunch of dicks or something. But
that's what
what's
Clancy
what's
said.
what's wild is how freely and openly people like Clancy share their time.
Mm,
And I could pick up the phone right now and call him, like cold call him, and I bet he would give me 15 minutes of his time and walk through something with me. And it's wild to me. And that's how most of the lawyers here at this firm are. And I just started here in January. So I'm not just towing the line. Like
sure.
I just started here. I was actually planning on starting my own firm, and my managing partner Michael convinced me to come on here instead, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
Um, but it's remarkable. People like Keith Mitnick, they'll do office hours before trial, and they'll talk to you and they'll give you stuff. Rick Block, these guys, like they'll give you, if you need time and you want to just walk through any case you're working on, they're
Yeah.
on it. They love this stuff, and it's so fun to see how their brains work.
Oh my
And
God.
it's so cool, like that they just do that.
Yeah.
It was so wild to me. Like, you think I could just pick up the phone and just call Keith Mitnick? Like, I can just do that now? It's just a thing that I'm allowed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I could just call him right now. They're like, yeah, I can ping him on Teams. I can ping Keith Mitnick. He probably won't look at Teams, but I could do that if I wanted to. They're like, yeah, you could do that. I'm like, that's so wild. All right.
That's what, no, no, you can keep going. That's what Clancy said too. He said, a lot of people shit on Morgan and Morgan and bad mouth, whatever. He goes, but the talent within the firm, he said, in the resources, it's unmatched. And
There isn't anything, there is no and this isn't elitism, it's just true. Because I was
yeah,
at a very small boutique firm before, great lawyer that I worked for, but it's a small outfit. There is no number two to Morgan and Morgan. There is nothing else like it.
yeah,
There's no other firm that has this kind of, you can pull anybody from anywhere on any part of your case, and everything's specialized, and they overstaff us. anything you need, they give you. If you
That's what
and
he said.
they require us to try 3 cases a year.
Yep.
Name another plaintiff firm that requires that.
Yeah.
That there's a requirement that you at least have to try 1 case from your inventory and two from you have to sit second chair or go out there at least for a couple others if they require you to try cases. So it's weird when you have a firm that's kind of everything because you're big enough to do that. Like on the,
Mhm.
people can say, oh, they're a big billboard advertising referral mill. Yeah, we can do that really well. Like look at Dan Morgan, what he's doing on social media. It's incredible. And
Yeah.
then there's the pre-suit. It's like, oh, you're just a settlement mill. You're just trying to settle cases. Yeah, in the pre-suit end, we're trying to get our client's case resolved quickly if we can. If there's a case that needs to be settled, doesn't need to be litigated, sure, get it resolved for something fair. But they do not let us settle cheap. Like they will not let you. Like if you
Yeah.
start settling cases cheap, you will get in trouble. You will get fired.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
cool that
then
they push you guys to those standards, though.
yeah, we are. It's very exacting. They do not let you just settle for garbage. Like they're like, what do you mean you're settling a disc herniation case for less than $50,000? What's wrong with you? You know, like no, get the hell back out there and litigate that thing. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And so then when you're in litigation and you're going to trial, like my last 2 trials here, each time I had 2 other lawyers on the case with me. They were both partners, and they were sitting like they were like second chair to me and I'm, just the brand new guy. And they stepped in. I have 2 partners. We got law clerks, paralegals. We got anything you need. But you have like the other side is like just one defense lawyer and maybe like an associate, and then we got like 2 very accomplished trial partners, like letting me do my thing. And they're doing their stuff, but everything's like orchestrated, like they're handling their chunk so that I'm only focusing on the stuff that I want to focus on. I've never tried cases like that before, and it was crazy. It is the just the support is, and just like even if it's just like the people standing behind you, kind of like shoving you forward, like you can do it, go, and get out there and let's go, let's do it. We got us, we're backing you up.
Yeah.
It's really cool. There's nothing like it.
Wow.
I've been here
Amazing.
since January, and it's crazy the
Yeah.
support.
That's amazing. Clancy said this same thing. He's been my first Morgan and Morgan. I've helped him with a life care planner and so worked with him just a little bit. But yeah, he said, John, we went back to the big, people are saying, "Oh, you're a mill and all this stuff." And he said, John pushes people. He said, "You will try 3 cases a year." And he said the same thing. And he said he pushes people to excellence. And he said, "I don't care, there's some firms that are conservative on trying cases." And he said, John's like, listen, no, that's how you get better. And we always talk, and you're like the third attorney that I've talked to about repetition, get the reps in, because improvement stacks on that and greatness follows. And the only way you're going to get better at anything in life is continuing to do that. But then you also have to reflect and ask, what can I get better on? I think it was Clancy said, I lost the first 5 cases when I was a new lawyer. He said, I had to sit back and say, what am I doing wrong?
But you have to really honestly reflect. And,
Mhm.
I stand on the shoulders of giants for trial lawyers, and I steal a lot of their shit. Like, Panish and Mick Rowley and all those guys, Mitnick. I steal all their shit shamelessly, and
Yeah.
try to incorporate it into my stuff. But one of the things that always struck with me in voir dire and things like that is brutal honesty. And I
Mhm.
think when you have a loss, you need to look back and kind of, I think this might be from Nick Rowley, this black box thinking of, all right, so you lost something, you feel like you did everything right. First of all, stop with that, but sometimes just because you lost doesn't mean you didn't do some things right.
Right.
Just everything you did was wrong. It means that you need to figure out what it was that where was the disconnect? Where was
Mm.
the problem? What could have been articulated better? Should you have conceded, some fault somewhere? Should you have been more aggressive somewhere? Should have been less aggressive somewhere? Is it, it's you have to really look at it and then just give yourself 24 hours to lick your wounds, but then get to like, all right, let's figure out what's wrong, But
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely it's critical. I've only tried 6 cases in my career. So I'm going to be trying a lot more while I'm here. But
Yeah.
I've won 5, lost 1, so it's a shame when it happens. But you gotta you gotta look at you. They say you learn from your losses, and yeah, you really go back and be like, what the hell? What did I didn't do anything really differently from the last time I tried my other cases. So what didn't work here?
Mm-hmm.
Was this? Then the other question is, and I don't know if lawyers ever want to accept this or think about it, is did the jury get it right? Did I misevaluate the case? Like, did I file it? Did I take a case up that was that questionable? I didn't really think that it was, but what was I missing? Was the error in intake? Was
Mm-hmm.
the error in evaluation of the case itself? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think that was the issue, but it's one of those things where if you have a loss, you really gotta like,
Mm-hmm. 1-5, lost one though.
yeah, I'm still up.
I mean, that's pretty dang good.
Yeah, I've never sat second chair in a trial either. I've had to kind of learn everything myself. My first trial, I was completely on my own. The
Sounds like they
partner,
have a lot of faith in you though.
I guess my first trial was back in 2017, and I was at my last firm, and my boss at the time, just said, "You got a trial? Like, good luck." And I went there on my own. I had no paralegal, I had no associate, I had no
Wow.
second chair. My boss wasn't even there. I just went in there and just did
Wow.
my best. It was crazy. It was like a rear end collision, bad crash, but kind of soft tissue injuries, which
Mm,
are in Michigan tough to get a verdict on because we have to show a serious impairment of a body function, which is some legal mumbo jumbo. You have to show that you have an objective injury to an important body function that is something that somebody else can see besides your own subjective complaints of pain, and it has to generally affect your ability to live your life for some amount of time. And they were offering like $2,000 on this case, and I just didn't agree with that. Like, I'm like, my client, she has serious pain in her lower back. I know she had a pre-existing spine condition, but she really has a lot of pain. And I just believed in the case, and I'm like, no, like, we're not taking $2,000. Like, no way. Now, did we try to settle the case? Sure. We had the case evaluated. It was evaluated for like a $40,000 valuation. And then, you know, they rejected that. The insurance company for the defendant rejected that because the insurance companies are the ones driving the bus in all these cases. It's never the little old person who's getting sued. It's always their insurance company wearing their face like a mask.
yeah.
So you have Allstate. I think it was Encompass, who was just saying no. And we went to a mediator, and the mediator said, well, we could probably get this case settled for like 25 or something like that. I think it was like 27.5 or 25,000. My client's like, my husband has cancer. Like, I just want to be done with this. If they're going to pay $25,000, this is just non-economic damages, it's pain and suffering. And I got my medical bills paid by no fault. So, fine. If they'll pay the 25,000, we'll take it. And then they said no. And so we're like, come on. And like, I didn't even like the 25, but my client's like, I want it. If they want to pay it, I don't want to go to trial. And I'm like, all right, well, so then they offered 2 grand. And so then we go to trial, and, we get to like halftime, where the plaintiff has rested, where we rested our proofs. And the judge is like, hey, defense lawyer, like, you guys aren't thinking about settling this case yet? Like, are you sure? And they're like, sorry, judge, we've had really good results of trial lately, so we're not going to settle.
Wow.
And we ended up with like, I think, just shy of a $200,000 recovery on that case. So,
Oh my gosh. Did you
so that was my first
anticipate that at
trial.
all?
Huh?
Did you anticipate that at all?
I don't even remember what I asked for. I don't even know what I asked for. I don't remember. I don't
Oh my
remember what the
gosh, I can't imagine her face when they ruled that.
Yeah, I think it ended up being like $150,000 verdict, and then there were sanctions that we got for attorney fees afterwards, where we
Yeah,
just
yeah.
settled like 196 or something like that with attorney fees and interest and stuff. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I had never
That
tried a
was your
case.
first one?
My first trial
Wow.
ever. Yeah. Um,
I can't wait to talk to you in 5 years.
if I'm even like half what Clancy is in 5 years, I'll consider that a
His
success.
demeanor is yeah, it's just
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. I am I am I am humbly in the shadow of these people at this point. I would love for them to even know who I am at some point. That would be
Yeah.
considered a success for me. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was my first trial. It was crazy. I remember like trying to figure out a way to because I was worried that we weren't going to meet the threshold injury standard in this case. And I was like, well, then I really got to prove the economic damages in this case. And I got to show some kind of economics because in Michigan, you couldn't even board medical expenses. You couldn't show medical expenses because my client had an unlimited no fault policy. So I had to find like work loss somehow. And so, but she had like no tax returns. She was like a stay-at-home mom who like taught piano lessons in her spare time. And
Hmm.
she did that under the table. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, I can try. And so I went on Microsoft Paint and created like a little diagram. Now, this is the high-tech stuff that I was rolling with back then,
Dude,
right?
this is
So
sweet.
I had this little like these little figurine things on Microsoft Paint to show the number of students that she was teaching before the crash and then the number of students she was teaching after the crash. And each of them was like a certain amount of money. So I projected out like over the course of the rest of her life, like her career with no experts. It was complete just like speculation, but I'm like, based upon her testimony, this is what she said. And so it was like, I don't know, like 200,000 to $300,000 or something over the course of her life for these, uh, student piano lessons that had no support. They had no, they had
Wow.
no tax returns, no nothing. And so the jury ended up no causing me on serious impairment, saying I got no non-economic damages, but then they gave me all of my damages through economic damages for those piano lessons. And I'm
Gee.
like, oh my God, did I just get a $200,000 verdict with Microsoft Paint?
That is a story that you need to tell forever because that's amazing.
So it's like, don't forget the little nuances, you might win
Yeah.
on something you do not expect in a way that might be surprising to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That story tell forever because that's awesome. Well, Gary, tell me like what first drew you into law, medical malpractice, personal injury, and was there like a specific case or experience that solidified your path?
So I only do auto negligence cases here at Morgan, but my older brother is a lawyer. My older brother Joel is also a lawyer. My grandfather was not a lawyer, but probably should have been in another life. So like the law was always kind of discussed in my family, but nobody pushed me into it. I'm sure in some way, I followed in the footsteps of my older brother because he's a lot older than me. He's about 13 and a half years older than me. But I don't know. I don't like seeing people get bullied. I was bullied as a kid. I was always like a little fat kid, and I was short. I'm like 5'6", so I always got bullied for being short and fat. And I didn't like seeing that to happen to other people. And so I'm also a big brother because I got my little brother, and so I didn't like see anybody push around my little brother. And so I don't know. My parents just raised me not to tolerate bullies and not to tolerate picking on people or, being cruel to people. And so, I always like to be a talker and, I was in the theater with that. So I was always kind of like, here I am. And so it kind of just, it was a path that nobody forced me to, but there was really no other career that I was going to end up in. I don't know what other profession I could get this kind of fulfillment from.
Mhm.
But a lot of it is, standing up for people. And, I know it's kind of a trite thing that, always, oh, I want to stand up for people and things like that. But it's true. It's really, really true. And there is such a sense of, I don't know what the word is. It's not pride. It's not, I don't know what the word is, but when you get to go up there and be the person that gets to speak for somebody who can't speak for themselves, and somebody's trying to call them liars and dragging them and saying they're making it up or it must be from something else, and you get to go up there and have a jury say, no, you were right. We believe you. And like, it's, it's a, it's an extremely fulfilling feeling to know that you got to help someone. And then you get to see the look on their family's faces that it's not even the money, it's the vindication. You got to tell the truth. You got to go up and tell a story and tell the truth, and then you get justice. And it's what a what an awesome privilege this job is,
Mm.
you know. And there's other parts of it that I like too. It's like a competitive strategy game in real time. It's a competitive storytelling strategy game that takes place over the course of a year or 2 or 3 years. That $5 million case that I just settled was like a 4.5 year endeavor. That was a lot of like you don't even realize you made a mistake on a case until sometimes like a year later. Like, oh shoot, I should have done that. Or you do something, you're like, I'm gonna do this now
Hmm.
because a year and a half from now it's gonna matter. And then when it finally comes to fruition, you're like, yes, it worked. But you don't know if it works for like a year. So you're playing this long strategy game. So like there's no other like career that lets you do that. It's such a and there's like the sparring back and forth with defense lawyers and negotiating, building relationships. It's a really interesting, fulfilling, challenging, rewarding job.
Yeah, I could
There's a
imagine.
lot.
No, no, I love it. I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, I think people are pulled or called into certain areas of life or certain careers based on the pain that they endured. So like you as a kid, you know what I mean? Like you're like, I know what it feels like. And your
Mhm.
purpose and your drive behind it is there's just, you can feel it too. And I bet your clients feel it too. They're like, this, I have never had someone fight for me like this in my life. It's because I was the other side before and I was in your chair. And so I think a lot of people can say, I want to be personable and fight for people. But when you have a story and purpose behind it and that drive, it's just, it hits different, I think.
It does. It
You know
does.
what I
And
mean?
part of the thing is, they teach you in law school, and I think it's wrong, for at least for personal injury, is oh, you have to separate yourself, you have to separate your emotions from the case. You have to be totally neutral, keep your clients at an arm's length and be detached. And I just think that's bullshit.
Mm.
I think you will lose if you don't let your because I think part of being a personal injury lawyer is we're on a contingency. So if our clients lose, we lose. We don't get anything. And you already have that skin in the game when you're just by the very nature of this arrangement is that we're in this together, right? We win or lose together. Why then would you not take that next step that says we win or lose together and I will feel your pain if we lose too? I feel what you're going through. I believe you and I will feel personally, like emotionally devastated, just like you will. And it's not the money, it's because I know that if you lose, I think it's wrong. And
Hmm.
I think that it's an injustice. And just to let yourself, how can you truly tell someone's story unless you really learn their story? Talk to them, care about them. That last case, I keep bringing it up because it was kind of recent,
Oh,
but
please do.
that big case, you know, my kids knew my client. They would call her like grandma, and I'm not going to say her name because it's confidential, but they would be like they would know who she was, like, oh, Gary's calling grandma, so and so. And so um, she would ask me how my kids were, like my kids were born during this case. Like I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old,
Oh,
and
wow.
they were born during this case. This it's wild to me, how time flies. I've gone through I was at my old firm and now I'm at a new firm. I've got 2 kids, and like this case has gone that long. And I spent so much mental energy and emotional energy thinking about this case, talking to her, getting to know her husband. How can you win if you don't let yourself get emotionally invested? You have to be all in.
Hmm.
If you're not all in and you're holding back, you're going to get a held back result, I think.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that makes my life more stressful and adds a lot of extra emotional baggage to every case that I take. But I guess, I just don't see another way to be effective. And they say that you should be a zealous advocate. I don't know how you be a zealous advocate if you don't give a shit about your client.
Yeah, someone told me a few months ago, don't even know who they are. And they said something that I'll forever remember. One of my posts must have resonated with them, and they said, you can't be impactful if you're invisible. And that sat with me hard. And I was like, that is so true. And with you and finding your voice, your mentors and people that you look up to, you're not reinventing the wheel, but like you said, you took you took a lot of like me too. You look at your mentors and stuff and until I find my voice, I'm going to do what the greats do. And then there's some point transition that you're like, I need to stick with who I am. And for you, it sounds like You want to be connected and tied to your clients because the fight is much more worth it. And you can feel the jury and your client has to feel that the way that you want to connect with them. So,
I've got to believe, you got to find before every trial that I have, I always go through this kind of same emotional process, probably to my family's chagrin. My wife's like, "Oh boy, here you go, it's trial mode again." And my mom, she's like, "All right, this is the part where you're looking at all the reasons why you should lose the case." I'm like, "Is it really that formulaic?" They're like, "Yes." You always go through the same mental process every trial. It's always you're never I'm not prepared enough. I don't know what to say. I don't feel like I know my client well enough. I don't feel like I'm telling the story right. Oh my God. Oh my God. And so like I go through all this stuff about here's why we're gonna lose this case is I gotta figure out the better way to deal with it. And this all this stress because I basically just do it in advance, I guess. So then when it's like a day before trial, all of a sudden something switches. And then it just no, there is no losing now.
mhm,
Now it's not helpful.
mhm,
The worrying, the planning, that's all done now. Like we did that part. So now when you go into the trial, it's there is no more doubt, there is no more fear, there is no more what we could have should have done. Now we have what we have.
mhm,
We're going into this thing. I've got what I've got the ammo that I've got the weapons that I've got. This is it. And now I gotta go win. And there is no more what we could have done.
mhm,
It just completely changes. And once you're there, the belief that takes over it's I don't even know how to describe it because it's almost like a completely different mental state. It's this pure, unshakable belief that this is righteous and this is just and this is the right and this is the truth. And there is no other answer. And there is no losing.
mhm,
There is no, it is a foregone conclusion that this must be won. And it is an interesting change, but in that it comes with this absolute commitment mentally, emotionally to my clients. I stay up at night thinking about them. I tell the jury sometimes, in my closing arguments or whatever, I'm like, I was up late last night. Like I was thinking about what you were all thinking about this case and thinking about my clients and there is a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous amount of pressure to get this right because we
mhm,
only get one chance to get it right. And this is the only time anybody's ever going to hear this story when it really matters for it to be told. And that's a lot of responsibility for me. It's a lot of responsibility for you as a jury. And I don't envy being in that position because I think being a lawyer is a lot easier. And I get to say I did my best, and, you know,
yeah, yeah,
but you have to believe. And I don't know when it happens in trial preparation, but at some point, I find some story or like I talk to my clients until I find it. I talk to my clients until I find that part that hits this chord inside of me that just feels like this is going to sound a little bit trite, but you feel like there's those clouds and there's all of a sudden that beam of light that shoots from the cloud. You're like, that's it. That's my case. I don't know. I don't care what anything else in this case is. That resonates with me. And that's what I think this case is really about. So my trial from back in June of this year, it's cool. It was Morgan and Morgan's first auto trial, and it was in Detroit. And it was a case that was referred to me and I brought with me from my last firm to here. And this other local firm brought us in as co-counsel to try it with them. And they were Chinese nationals and they were missionaries and they were in Michigan, just on a mission trip, like they were getting missionary training. And, I didn't really know them that well because I just got this case kind of near the end. The other firm had done most of the work, all the work up. And I was trying, it was a few days, like a week or so before this trial. And I was like hating on myself, getting mad at myself. I'm like, you didn't spend enough time. And the whole strategy of like the whole pattern of shitting on myself, for not doing enough work on that case or not doing this, not doing that. I'm like, you didn't talk to these clients enough. You didn't spend enough time getting to know them. The hubris that you have to like think that you can tell these people's story after meeting them for like a week. And I'm like, whatever. And then at some point, I'm like, well, you know what? Figure it out, talk to them. really talk to them. Use your time efficiently. Like be be fully present. You only spend a lot of when you think about how much time you actually spend with people in your lives, even people who are really close to you. You don't spend every waking moment with them. You only spend targeted and important time with them, and you just be present, right? I'm like, I thought about my kids. I work all day and I come home and then they go to bed about 8. So I get what? I get home at 6:30. I get about 2 good hours with my kids during the week, each night. And it's really a shitty thing to think, right? But it's true. You get about 2 good hours and make those hours count because they matter. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get to know this woman and talk to her, really talk to her. And so, is she actually from her crash, she didn't have a lot of treatment. She had physical therapy, and then she actually went to Africa with her husband to go work on missionary work there, despite having compression fractures in her spine. So she had multiple level compression fractures, superior end plate fractures. I'm sure you know what those are. I was getting to know this woman, and she was telling me about these stories about. I was just walking through like, what's it like to have these fractures? And she's a new mother, and we had just our baby was just born in March, so my and we had just had the other one. He's 2 at this point, he's almost 3. But I very it's very fresh in my mind, the infancy stage and the toddler stage. Like I've gone through this. They had this baby's an 18-month-old now. Not a baby anymore, really, it's a toddler, and I was asking her, like, what was it like having pain in your back like this and raising an infant. Like, what was that like? That must have been really hard because I know how hard it is for my wife to go through breastfeeding and even just rocking the baby at night because they don't sleep. And, it's just hard. And so I was trying to figure out, and I started talking to her, and all of a sudden I just realized this parenting experience that I have, I get it. I get it. So I was asking her about this stuff, and she told me that she had to watch her mother-in-law birth her baby. And it just the way she said it, I just knew, and it was nothing against her mother-in-law. And I just knew there was so much more to that.
Mhm.
You know, to have a mother, I've seen my wife, with our children, the amount of pain and you feel like you're giving up every single moment with that little baby. You don't want to give up any of it.
Mhm.
You want all of it. It's This is your moment. And they had gone through fertility issues, and we went through fertility issues. Like I get it. So this is like the little miracle baby, and it's being stolen from her. This moment, these little moments, the ones that matter the most,
Mhm.
little moments you're never going to get back. She has to watch someone else burp her baby and comfort her baby. She can't do it because she can't lift them. And I'm like, oh, that's the case.
Mhm.
That's everything. And from that, it positions you mentally to really understand what this poor person went through and what she's still going through. You think if she's faking it, you think she's like method acting, like she's not faking it.
Mhm.
Mother wouldn't fake that. You
Yeah.
know, that's that's not that's real. That's a real problem. And so this trial in June, the last pretrial offer that they had for this case was $13,500 for this woman and her husband. Um, because the insurance company looked at this like a bag of stats and didn't see a lot of treatment, didn't see any surgery, didn't see any injections, didn't see anything more than a back brace out of the ER and 6 months of physical therapy and then no further treatment. And that's all she had for her workup. But I mean, she was still in pain. And, we went to trial and we got a $2.1 million verdict because the jury believed, the jury heard the real story. There's the difference between like listening to somebody and really hearing them. And when you find that beam of light through the clouds for the case, you're like, that's something that's real. That's a real injury. And somebody, this isn't somebody making it up.
Yeah.
So I guess the jury bought it too. I mean, they believed it too. Our foreman or foreperson ended up being a woman who was breastfeeding during the trial. And so like we had these longer breaks and she had to pump, but I know how hard that is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, but I know what my wife had to
Yeah.
go through all that and still has to go through. But it's an important thing. And so people are like complaining about the woman breastfeeding. I'm like, no, like that's like this is if she doesn't do that, like if she doesn't do that, then she's not gonna be able to produce breast milk. Like she has to do this, and she has to do it on a schedule. Like, I completely understand it. Like how could you be annoyed by somebody doing that? And I'm like, that's because I have this experience that other people don't have, and it's wild to me that this person ended up being the four-person, but maybe the story resonated with her enough that she's like, no, I want to be I want to be this woman's voice. I want to fight for this woman. So I don't
But
know. It was really cool. It was
and
really
I
cool.
think that for you to not a lot of people have what you have, Gary. You notice about your wife too. Like I have two children too. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. And for you to just empathize and not even empathize, but just be like, dude, she's breastfeeding. Like if she doesn't pump and she's got to pump every, I don't know, 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, like her milk production slows down. And then you have your own experience and you're like, I know what my wife went through and is going through. And some people are like, oh, it's just pumping because they don't get it. But you get it and you see it and feel it and internalize it too. And so I think that is why you are as good as you are, even with not 20 years of experience. But that one resonates with me, just the your ability to notice those details and connect it. And this all might seem minor, but it's way bigger. It's way bigger than what it seems surface level. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. Tell me about like one of the most complex cases you've worked on. And it sounds like you've named 2 or 3 so far, but what made it challenging medically, legally? And the second question to that is how did you and your team approach that complexity?
So I think I kind of may have gotten ahead of myself with the complicated one, and I think that one that we just
Let's,
resolved for
yeah,
the
no,
five
yeah.
million dollar one, that the number doesn't really do the case justice. It's like people say, "Oh, $5 million verdict or settlement from Morgan and Morgan." Like, oh, it must have been a really easy case. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Even with like pretty clear liability, you have a situation where my client had a lot of they were older. She had a lot of pre-existing conditions. She wasn't particularly compliant with her treatment regimen. And I get it, it's hard. It's hard to like go through this for that long, like you just eventually you lose hope.
Mhm.
Um, but she had a host of injuries. She had like diabetes that was chronic and uncontrolled, and she would always insist like none of this has to do with that. And I know they just say that I'm chronic uncontrolled diabetes, but that's just medical diagnosis. It doesn't mean what that says it on the paper. And I'm like, okay, I get that, but like a lot of your stuff, like you have syncope and things like that, that like can explain a lot of these things that you might be having. And so I had to kind of and then she has a host of injuries. She had both of her shoulders were injured, her neck was injured, um, you know, her knees were injured, her ankles were injured, her feet were injured. She has a TBI. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of injuries. And I had to first I had to pull back emotionally and be objective with this case. Where I'm like, all right, I believe her. I want to believe her, but of course I do,
Mhm.
right? So let's be objective. So how did I approach it? First, I made sure that, that the doctor, I met with all of her doctors, all of them, talked to them, all of them. And I'm like, is she for real? Is this from the crash or is this from something else? If you're treating her for something else, that's fine. I just need to know. Like it's totally fine. Like talking to her doctors, like just be real with me, doc. Like I don't care. If you can't tell me to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that what you're treating her for is because of this crash, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I just need to know. Like, I need to tell the truth and I want to know. So, like, tell me, do you have any inkling, even a little, that this might not be related? And they're like, that some of them would say yes and some of them would say no. And so I'd be, okay, so now I can narrow my issues. And then, you know, most of them overwhelmingly said, no, she's only having these problems after this crash. Like, I think this is from the crash, you know? And if not from the crash directly, it's an exacerbation that is affecting them, right? I'm like, okay, an exacerbation counts. It's part of the rules. An exacerbation of an underlying condition is absolutely considered a new injury as far as the law is concerned. So, okay, but as long as you guys believe that, because I don't want to go in there and oversell a case that I don't need to oversell.
Yep.
We've got somebody who's really hurt here. If it's only one or two of these injuries that are conclusively established, I can live with that. That's okay. You
Mhm.
know, but they're like, no, these are all related. I'm like, all right. So, I met with all of her doctors multiple times. And then, I had the independent consultant, I had Catherine look at it, I think I had Centerpoint on this one too for a medical cost projection. And I made sure that I looked at everything. We focus grouped it. We used a company I think called Emotion Track, which was interesting. Where they will panel 100 people, and then they'll read their facial expressions and see where the biases are for things. When you have a complex case, I guess my strategy was to try to narrow it if we can. And if we can't narrow it, we need to organize it.
Yeah.
And if we can't organize it, we need to trim out the stuff that can't fit in. You don't need to prove every single thing. I think people might, when they have a case like this, it's like a fire hose, they might think, I need to fit all of this fire hose into this funnel. It's okay to not have some of it be related. Because here's the thing I think some lawyers and people and even insurance companies forget. Not every injury has to be from the crash, but just because you have a condition, you might have something that's completely unrelated to the crash, but you still have to live with that with your injuries from the crash, right?
Sure.
So your ability to cope with something that may not be related is going to be impacted by the injuries that you do have.
Mhm.
So let's say that everything she has, this diabetes, obviously is not related, right? But she still has diabetes,
Yeah.
and she might, it's still chronic and it's still a difficult condition for her to live with, and it's going to make healing from things more difficult.
Yep.
But she still has the diabetes, and then imagine throwing a neck injury on top of that. You know, it
Mhm.
doesn't make it easier. And that's damages right there, right? You don't need the diabetes to be from the crash, but living with that condition is now that much more difficult.
Yep.
And
I think.
so if you can't fit it into the funnel, put it in context, right?
Mhm.
Organize it. If you can't narrow it, at least organize it so you can figure out that part of that is talking to your client and understanding them too. And so understanding the context of this person's life and figure out where this all kind of fits together in this tapestry of their existence.
As a behind the scene nurse to you guys, but here's the prior medical conditions, the injuries sustained at the time of the incident, and then all the diagnoses after. And there's a difference between, and I learned this through Dr. Brandon Carter. He's a chiropractor. He is founder of PI Sciences, and they're a personal injury medical management service provider. So they have a team where they do medical cost projections, MMI, maximal medical improvement, and they're out in Utah, but they evaluate and read radiology reports and do all that. We were talking about conditions that were exacerbated, and he said aggravated is the word you're looking for. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, aggravated refers to permanent worsening of a pre-existing condition. Well, exacerbation refers to temporary worsening of the symptoms. He's like, when you use the word exacerbation, it's a flare-up that returns to normal baseline. But there's a lot of conditions that are aggravated that don't. And I was like, I learned something new every day. One of the attorneys I talked to, he said, find three, because if you have 10 and it actually, like, if you go through 10 claims or 10 issues, sometimes it can come off not so confident in the case. He said, but if you
Correct.
come in on the first three, he said, just nail the three down. And
And that's kind of what I did on this case, where it's like you try to narrow it, right? And if not, find the three best, that you can for sure
yeah,
relate. And I was doing that at the beginning, but then I realized that these other issues were still, she was gonna talk about them anyway. And there was no way to, I mean, she had a brain injury. And if she didn't have a brain injury, whatever her symptoms were very, very brain injury-esque.
yeah,
So if they thought she didn't have a brain injury, it could have been a combination of lack of sleep, chronic pain, all this other stuff. But I've had a lot of traumatic brain injury cases, and I would be very, every doctor that she was treating with was saying she had one. The only person that was saying she didn't was the hired doctor from the defense. But even if you gave them the benefit of the doubt, which,
mhm,
whatever,
yeah,
she was going to talk about this other stuff anyway. And so part of that is just knowing what your client's going to say, despite how much you prep them.
Hmm.
and know how you're going to deal with that because you have to know your client. And I knew she was going to talk about it and she was not going to not talk about it and she was not going to be able to separate some of the stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to stop this from happening. So I need to be able to I need to be able to deal with this and put it in context because the jury's going to hear about it. If this goes to trial, I can't narrow it to three because she's not going to. And
Yeah.
if she's talking about all this stuff and I'm up there only talking about three things, the jury's be like,
Hmm.
do you just not believe your client then? So you don't believe her, right? So why should we? So the only way that I could put this into context was I need to talk about everything, but I need to talk about everything in a cohesive way that puts things in context. And so that's again, just know your client. And then that's why, I was trying to do that very thing you were talking about. Let's narrow it to three, but I'm like, that's not going to work because she's not going to narrow it.
That's interesting
But
perspective.
she's living with this, right? She's living
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
and she wants her story told right.
Mhm.
She wants what happened to her to be known and wanted, that's what she wanted almost more than anything else was that she wanted to be believed. And she wanted to not be just some hysterical old lady who just has all these problems. It's got to be something else. No, she wasn't this way before. This wasn't how she was. And it was very, very important to her that it be put into context. And so I'm like, all right, so I got to talk about all of it. So we had to figure out a way to do that. And that was really challenging, but we did it.
Well, let's elaborate. Let's go into that even further. It's interesting for you to say, I love how you wrap that around and say, listen, I know my client. She wants to tell her whole story and I can't control that. But what I can control are the controllables, and that's my part, right? So your strategy shift, talk more about that, narrowing it down, like what made it so complex.
So I felt very strongly about the neck. That was confirmed. I got the defense doctor to concede that the neck was related on a deposition. So I took his deposition and I got him to agree with the neck injury was related. So then we had that neck. We got that. That's 100% related, right? Even if it wasn't aggravation of an underlying condition, this neck injury, this was real. So I'm like, okay, I've got this.
Hmm.
Good, right? Then the brain injury was tricky because brain injuries are just even the best brain injury cases are always a whole thing. They're the brain is so I don't by any means hold myself out as like a brain injury specialist lawyer. I know what I know, I know what I don't know, and I know that there are people who are far, far better at it than me, but I try to do the best I can. I know when I have a brain injury case that you got to
Yeah.
take them. You got to be very, very cognizant that some symptoms are from the brain injury and some things are combinations of other things. And it may not be, you can't put things nicely in little baskets, it's all the problem is when you have lack of sleep, chronic pain, stress, PTSD, and a brain injury, they compound on each other. They don't separate. You have all of them
Mm-hmm.
all at once, and they all make each other worse. The pain makes it so you can't sleep. The sleep aggravates the pain. The lack of sleep makes the brain injury stuff worse. The brain injury makes you perseverate on thoughts. So if you're perseverating and you got PTSD, now you're going to perseverate on the accident, right? So it's all they all make each other worse. So your existence is exponentially worse the more of these things that you have. So having them all together doesn't mean you have a worse case. It means your client's existence is that much worse. You have to just explain. It doesn't have to be because of the brain injury. It's not all because of the brain injury. If the brain injury is an amplifier,
Mm-hmm.
right? It makes everything that much harder to cope with, that much more difficult for your client. And it doesn't mean that your client's memory issues are 100% because of the brain injury, but it's not helping. And so you have to, figure out how to do that. So as far as trying to narrow it down, I felt pretty good about the brain injury, felt good about the neck. Some of her orthopedic stuff was a lot easier to conclude, like her shoulder. I think she had a tear in her shoulder. She had a mild fracture in her tibia and her knee. So that was a pretty objective one. So I think her neck, her knee, I was pretty confident with. One of her shoulders, I was very confident with. The rest of it, the doctors were saying that it was related, and I'm not going to dispute that with them. And they were very confident, but I was trying to narrow it to three, and I'm like, I really can't because everybody's saying it's all. I mean, she got hit by a car, the pedestrian, so she got like really hit.
Yeah.
So it's not crazy, but I tried to narrow it, and I'm like, no, we're gonna have to tell the whole story. they're just going to have to figure out the way to tell the whole story. We can't narrow it down, but we can organize it, and so we just kind of, all right. So this neck injury is a thing, and this is kind of everything's kind of like I'm kind of anchoring everything onto that, and then you kind of start, when you have like I don't know, it's like a bedpost or something, and you got your bedpost, and so now the neck injury is the bedpost, and you can throw a towel on it, and throw another towel on it, throw another towel on it. And
Yeah.
then some of the things that might be falling out, while you throw another towel in, that'll hold that towel there long enough.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had our anchor. I knew no matter what, I have that neck injury. That's conclusively established to be related. So everything else is just great. Everything else is kind of just extra.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to tell the jury, I'm like, folks, even if you just don't believe anything else she's saying, I'm going to tell you all of it. I'm going to tell you it's all related. Her doctor's going to tell you it's all related. The only people who are going to tell you that it's not are these doctors they hired. But let's throw it all out, right? What's the one injury that we all agree on? An injury to my client's cervical spine, her neck. Everybody agrees that this is related. You really think all the rest of this stuff isn't? Like, even they agree that this person's neck got injured in this crash and that it's affecting her life and she needed to have a cervical spine surgery fusion. You really think everything else is just an accident? That's just a big coincidence? That this crash was enough to injure her neck to the point that she needed surgery? Everything else is just a big coincidence. And so once I had that, I'm like, okay, now I can talk about everything because I've got this kind of bedpost that I can throw the towels on. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
That's so good. That's so good. So we kind of touched on before, Gary, like I often hear that failure is our greatest teacher. I can talk all day about my failures and trial and errors and mistakes, but it's how I can speak from the state today. And by all means, haven't reached a point. I'll never reach that point. And I think if people start to feel like they've hit the top, it's when you start. It's when I wouldn't say start losing, but it's when you stop learning. And I have a long way to go. But with my mistakes and my trials and errors and fumbling, getting back up again, what was one of your greatest teacher moments in your life as an attorney?
I think without getting into specifics of things, just for appellate reasons and things like that, but I think knowing that you can lose even when you shouldn't is a really important thing as a lawyer to know that jurors they can bite, and uh there are people out there and you may not have this magic power that you think you do over people. When you win five in a row, you think you got some gift, you're the greatest lawyer in the world, you're just gonna get him every time. Losing one, it puts into perspective the stakes, I think. It puts in perspective what we do and the reality that if our clients lose, we lose. And it makes it really real. Honestly, it's a weird feeling to say this, but it was almost a relief. I don't know how to describe it. It's a weird feeling where you're like, oh, all those times that I did win, that was pretty cool that I did that. That was pretty impressive that we did that we won those. Anytime you win, it's impressive. You kind of lose. If you don't lose, you don't have the perspective to know that you can lose. And if you don't think that you can lose, then you get kind of entitled and maybe you get a false sense of your own grandeur, your own ability. And it was a weird feeling. It was a horrible feeling. I don't want to take away that. Like it's probably one of the most horrible feelings you can feel standing there in a courtroom and losing. When you really feel like you did everything you could and that you did it right and that you were telling the right story, but they didn't believe you, or they didn't think you did something right, or they just whatever it was. Um, I think the teachable moment from that is that you're mortal and the stories that you tell don't have magic power and you can lose and you should if anything it made me like some people like lose and they just take it so personally like, oh, I'm going to quit the practice of law and all this stuff. No, I wanted to go try another case like the following Monday. I'm like, I want to go do another one right now. Like I wanted to do a do-over I wanted to go and be like, I want to immediately implement things that I thought that maybe could have been done better, or that I want to go see. I want to see this again. I want to run like this case 1,000 times and see how it goes 1,000 times. I want to see, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did this? I want to just run this through a simulation 4,000 times and see how many times we win and how many times we lose and see what happened. But I think, your brain starts spinning. I try to use this kind of tremendous sense of loss, and it wasn't failure, because I would feel like a failure if I didn't give it everything that I had. I always got taught as a kid that if you did your very best, whatever you got is the best you can do, and you truly believe that, then you're not allowed to feel disappointment with yourself. You can be upset. You can have a sense of loss. You can mourn it. You can feel upset. You can feel angry. You can feel however you feel about it. You're human. You're going to feel all kinds of things. But I didn't really feel a sense of defeat, I guess. It's a weird feeling. I didn't feel like it made me feel less as a lawyer. It made me feel like I was less as a person. I just felt, huh,
Mm.
like that can happen. And that did just happen. And maybe I'm still reconciling it. But it made me really appreciate just the stakes of what we do as lawyers and what we do as trial lawyers. And personal injury trial lawyers is a very small subsect of that, where you know you really are laying it all out on the line. Sometimes you're going to lose. You're going to go out there. It's like boxers. You're going to go out there and box. You're not going to win every single fight forever. You're going to lose eventually. And I'm kind of, I'm at a point in my career where, I'm not going this wasn't like my first trial or my second trial, my third trial. I'm not going to be defined by my losses. And, I've got a pretty good track record here. Morgan and Morgan trusted me enough to hire me. And this loss isn't going to kill me. But it definitely puts things in perspective and makes you realize how important it is what we do. And you can bet your ass we're going to do some black box thinking and figure out what the hell happened here. And if there was something that could be fixed, if you think that you tried a perfect case even when you won it, bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something you could do differently or better. It's never 100%. Even these monster verdicts people get, millions and millions of dollars, $100 million. I know a guy, Grant Gillenwater at our firm, has got like $100 million verdict on a monster case about a month ago, and he's one of the top trial lawyers in the country. If I don't know if he's the top trial lawyer, but he's up there. Um, I'm sure that if you ask him about that $100 million verdict, if there were things that he would change or do better, I guarantee he's already got a list in his head of things he would do better. There's always room to improve. And I
I
think
think
just
great people, great
your
leaders.
losses make that more apparent.
Yeah, I think great leaders and people who are considered the great, they always audit themselves no matter what. And they audit themselves after wins, they audit themselves after losses, no matter what career you're in. And I think
We
it,
audited ourselves after that verdict a couple months ago, like after we won. All right, what was right, what was wrong, what could we have done better? Did the
yep,
same thing, just debriefed it.
yep, yep, that's right. In your experience, what's the most overlooked factor that can change the trajectory of a personal injury case?
That gut feeling at intake,
Mm,
your gut's probably right.
mm,
Whatever it is. Like you have a case comes across your desk and you're immediately like, I don't know. Something about the way they were talking to me, something about the way that they told that recitation of how the crash happened, or the way they talked about how they got to that doctor, or the way that they talked about that injury just didn't seem right. Or they said, my last attorney wasn't working for me. They were no good. They didn't listen to me. And maybe that's true. Maybe. But if you're like, oh, they're a pretty good law firm. That's a pretty good lawyer. I know that lawyer. I don't like this case. You should get rid of that case.
mm, mm-hmm.
You should trust your gut, because I've had a couple times, I've always listened to my gut from now on. If I have a nose wrinkle at a case, it'll take a lot to make that nose wrinkle go away. Where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
My case manager and I will talk about cases, and she'll come in and be like, "Hey, we got an interesting one." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't like interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I deal with car crashes. They shouldn't be interesting. What is going on?" She's like, "Well, this client." I'm like, "All right, nope, nope. I don't want any part of this drug deal. Like, I don't want any part of this. Nope, 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 nope. We'll turn it down. We'll refer it out. Somebody else can handle it. I'm not touching a case that we're both like. If you're making that face at the very beginning of the case, it's not going to get better.
Mm. So
So
true.
you've got,
So
if
true.
you got a feeling about a case, or if you got a case likewise where you're like, I don't know what it is about this case. You know, it doesn't seem like it's that interesting or that compelling of a case. Doesn't seem that special or anything. He seems like he's hurt, but he's not treating that much. But I just believe the guy.
Yeah.
I had this guy from the UP, newish case. I'm not going to get too much into the details, but something about the way that he's talking about him not being able to get into his fishing boat. That he's an older guy. He used to go fishing, and he's a Youper, so that's what they do. They go hunting, they go fishing, and the guy can, he's a chatterbox. He sounds like he's like the heart of the UP. Oh yeah, well, but he's talking about how he couldn't get in his fishing boat and he couldn't go hunting and he can't dress the deer anymore on his own, and he hasn't gotten that much treatment yet. And the accident's about 6 months old and he hasn't done much yet, but he's talking about him still not being able to do this stuff. So I'm like, I just believe him.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna keep it. We're gonna figure it out,
Yeah.
The guy's a yapper too. So I even had to pull out every little bit of like Uberese that I could speak where I was like, well, suppose it's about that time, huh? You know? And that actually got him off the phone. He's like, oh yeah, well, I've been talking to you enough. Suppose it's about that time. Like, oh my God, that actually moved.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, right?
No, I
Suppose
think
it's about that time.
you're right. Yeah, I think it's about that time. You're right. Gary, this was awesome. I appreciate you taking over an hour on your Friday. Hey, if this episode changed the way you think or gave words to something that you already practice, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you know someone who makes high stake decisions, maybe solves complex problems and works in gray areas, send this episode their way. Between the Lines is for people who care about how judgment actually works. We'll see you on the next one.